Florida, as Jen likes to say, it's there are a plethora of different stories, that we can really dive into here. But I would definitely say, as far as what is of the most significance right now, we do have a very important issue that's taking place up in Tallahassee, which is about the gambling laws in the state of Florida. Now, for those of you who know, Ron DeSantis is going to do anything and everything to get reelected as governor because he thinks he's going to be the next president.
Nacho Libre.
Not Nacho Libre.
That's Ron DeSantis. I just had this thing. It was funny that was. He
kind of has a little Jack Black thing going on.
Yeah, a little bit. But no, it was funny. When it was that he saying he will pardon those who were, got in trouble with violating the mask mandates. I'm just looking, I'm like, that mask would be a violation, I suppose.
Well, I don't exactly know where he's going with this, but on the one hand, you have the one major story, which is, of course, DeSantis is only looking at this from the perspective of what is going to increase his chances of getting elected. Now, Jen happens to be a resident of the town of Davie, and that happens to be one of the two municipalities that splits a portion of the land with the Seminole tribe that covers the very gauche, as Jen likes to say.
I can't with that.
Seminole Hard Rock Casino Hotel and Property.
It's a giant guitar.
It is a massive source of revenue.
Honestly, it's like I could get all Freudian about the whole phallus nature of the whole thing. Like, why must we have this giant guitar just sort of sticking up out of the middle of flat Hollywood? It looks ridiculous. It really does.
There is no question that it is an eyesore. It doesn't really have a place, but it's no different than the skyline in South Broward and North Miami, as you call it, the concrete villages.
Yeah, but this is different. It's just a soul guitar, It's just a lone guitar.
So what DeSantis is doing is the two municipalities are Davie, which is where Jen lives, and the other one is Hollywood. Davie happens to be an area that is fairly split in terms of the votes. It's Democratic, but it does have a sizable portion of Republican votes.
Yeah.
Whereas in
more so than Hollywood.
Well, Hollywood is one of the most blue towns in all of Florida. So what they're trying to do is shift the tax benefits from Hollywood by about 20% over to Davie. This is tens of millions of dollars in revenue.
Go Davie.
So much so that the mayor of Hollywood, Josh Levy, felt the need to make a trip up to Tallahassee today to lobby against this effort. And again, why is he doing this? He's doing this because it's going to benefit him politically. And that is the one thing you could say about...
Well, and he wants his money for his city.
Oh, he absolutely does.
They want their money.
Well, they also know that the town of Hollywood is not going to be whipping votes for the reelection efforts of Ron DeSantis, whereas there are potential people in the town of Davie that will be doing that.
Yeah.
And if you give the town of Davie a lot of money, if there's one thing I can tell you about Florida politics, the Democrats cannot afford to lose any votes in Broward County. They can't. And that is one of the reasons why Trump won this state relatively easily and why it's going to be very difficult, regardless of who is the Democratic nominee, to win this state next year and take it from Ron DeSantis, because Ron is only thinking about one thing. He's not thinking about reelection. He's thinking about winning the presidency in 2024. So he feels that this is going to be sort of his springboard efforts in order to do it. And the one thing I will say, even though it's horrifically bad, to his credit, Ron is very, very transparent in his ability to be bought. You offer him enough money, he'll do whatever is necessary in order to make it so. So that's why he's doing these things, if you will, these little proxy moves here and there that he thinks is going to help him win. Well,
and he's addressing different audiences with different things.
Absolutely.
He's definitely campaigning. He is campaigning.
And one thing that I think you should touch upon, because you know better than I do, there is a very distinct difference between the Seminole tribe and pretty much every other tribe that exists.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that's an important distinction for people that are not in Florida or South Florida, because in most places and every other place that I know of, when we talk about our indigenous people and our indigenous communities, they are vulnerable, they are oppressed, and they are people that are struggling. But that is not the case with the Seminoles. The Seminoles are actually quite wealthy. All Seminoles get monthly stipends. They can live for free on the reservation. They own every Hard Rock in the world except for Las Vegas. So my point is that when we're talking about our tribe, it is a lot more political money than it is worrying about vulnerable indigenous communities. So that's that, just here.
And then, of course, Ron has to, and again, this is the financial component. This is the strategic component.
Yeah.
And again, I don't like it. It's unethical, but it works. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And that's politics, and especially Florida politics in a nutshell. And then, of course, Ron doesn't slow down. He throws a nice piece of red meat to his base, which is when he suggests that if anyone has been arrested, given a summons of any kind for violating mask mandates, he's going to pardon them. Isn't that nice?
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. Thanks, Ron.
Because
you
couldn't have driven the wedge any deeper than he did last week by saying, hey, everyone talking about defunding the police, we're going to overfund the police. And for him, again, this is the thing. Messaging is key. And he's only doing what he thinks he has to do in order to win. I understand that. But again, like I said, ethics, it really goes out the door when we're talking about Florida politics. Yeah. And that is a very big problem. And again, why does it make sense to shift so much of the financial benefit from Hollywood over to Davey? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't shift some of the benefit
it's clearly politically. I mean, clearly it's calculated according to his voting demographic. So.
Yeah, and our good friend Elijah Manley says it best. Ron does whatever he wants at our expense. And that's true. Because of such a dominated GOP legislature, he can get away with what he wants to get away with, which is why if we are able to unseat him next year, obviously it would be a complete shock to the system for the GOP. I actually think in a lot of ways, if DeSantis was able to be defeated, I do think that the party would really be in shambles, because I don't think the more I think about it, the more I really think it's going to be hard for Trump to run again. I think with him being off of social media for so long, I think it'd be hard to really garner that support that he would.
Nothing surprises me anymore, but
no.
But the problem is that I don't see anybody that I think is capable of beating DeSantis.
I would agree. I think it's going to be very tough.
And I don't say that to be defeatist. No. I say that just based on.
I just think people don't realize just how popular he is. He leaned in. He is Trump's heir apparent. He really is. And he has embraced it. You see the other people who are trying to do it, like Elise Stefanik, but she's trying to do it in the state of New York. I mean, I don't know where she thinks she's getting with that. Obviously it got her to move up in the party. And again, most things that you'll see, guys, is all about political calculation, where people think is the next stepping stone. Now, not everybody's like that. Let's be fair. There are good people in the ranks, but we're using the most obvious examples of, political opportunism that one is going to take advantage of in order to get where they want to go. But the one thing about Ron DeSantis, his loyalty is not misguided. It's actually one that's deeply rooted in the fact that Donald Trump made him the governor of this state.
Oh, yeah. He basically ordained him.
He did. A lot of people forget, and this is one thing that Mary and I have no doubt is very well versed in. People have a very short-term memory in politics. Adam Putnam was cruising along as the Commissioner of Agriculture, the position that Nikki Fried holds now, was going to be the Republican nominee for governor, and very likely would have won too. But Trump stepped in and said, I totally want this guy. I want this Ron DeSantis. I think he'll be a great governor. And the next thing you know, boom, like a rocket ship, there he goes.
Right.
There he went. And he's the governor. And as far as Ron is concerned, and maybe this
let's not, we can't overlook that the popularity of Trump and, like you said, his lack of presence on social media is definitely sort of deflated a lot of that. And
that's true.
And the momentum isn't there. And it's not that is why I think that Ron is out doing all of these good deeds, because he's really going to have to, step it up, because Trump is not going to be enough.
No, Trump is not going to be enough. But that is also why I think a lot of it hinges on whether or not DeSantis does win next year. I do, because I think that there's a definite civil war going on in the party right now. A lot of people are not really sure about where and what direction it's going in. But with that said, we know that there's always shifting demos and things that happen. The New York Post is always happy to point out. And granted, my grandfather, who is from New York, still reads the New York Post at 93 years old, even to this day.
I feel like I always need to include a Post article whenever.
Yes.
They are obsessed with us. There is never a day where they're not talking about Florida in New York.
Well, again, Florida.
I know.
They're bringing the new.
But they usually point out they don't. They usually point out the really bad things about us.
And yes. Well, to be fair, Florida is the 6th borough and it should be more specific, South Florida and even more specific, Southeast Florida is the 6th borough of New York City. Palm Beach, Broward, Miami.
Yeah, I always said it's like sort of if a little island, sort of like Long Island, fell off of the coast and drifted down and then attached itself at the bottom of Florida. That's always what it's like.
That's what's ultimately going to end up happening, because that's where we're heading.
Well, look, eventually the rest of the country is going to be done with us and they're just going to cut us off literally and let us just go floating out to sea.
That is also one of the things, before we get to our last point about the story, that I think is very important. And I talk about this with, I have a couple of friends who are high up in the state party. And the one thing that I do talk to them about is most of this state does not like Southeast Florida. They don't like it. I'm talking about Democrats.
Shocking.
There is a very big distinction. We are regarded as carpetbaggers.
Yes.
We're not Floridians in the true sense, and they don't like that. And let's face it, a significant portion of the Democratic voting bloc that lives in Southeast Florida, they're snowbirds. So that's another thing you also have to keep in mind. They don't exactly plant their flag fully in the state of Florida, and that is something that a lot of people don't like. And so I get that. They're only bringing in tax revenue, if you will, for a certain portion of the year. There's a lot of elements to consider, and yet for some reason, the party itself doesn't seem to learn its lesson. And I'm not going to dive into the weeds. We will talk about this on another show, but it's already been brought to my attention by a couple of political insiders that Manny Diaz, as the head of the Florida Democratic Party, is doing a horrifically bad job. Am I surprised?
I'm so shocked.
No. Why would you be surprised? What's surprising about it?
Well,
this was Michael.
He's a Republican.
This was Michael Bloomberg's hand-picked guy.
Right, but even before, Manny Diaz is literally was a Republican who is now in charge of the Democratic Party in our state.
Lourdes, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, but truth is truth, and I got to keep it 100%.
No offense, Lourdes.
We're not doing these things that we need to do in order to move the party where it needs to go. So in a way, that's why Florida is so GOP dominated, even though it shouldn't be.
Because a Republican runs our Democratic Party.
We have more registered Democrats than we have Republicans in the state. So you would think we would be more competitive, but
we're not. Well, our infrastructure, we have no infrastructure.
We have no infrastructure.
That's the biggest thing, because we only exist in 7 counties?
No, about 8 or 9. But if you're talking about counties with a significant population, it's about 6. It's
not enough that warrants having a statewide infrastructure.
And again, that's where it becomes a problem.
Issues.
So where they're like, well, it's all densely populated. Yes, but you're not taking into account the value of having the commissions and the state committee people in all these various counties. These things are important. Yes. Infrastructure is so key. Yeah. And that's what the GOP does 10 times better than the Democrats.
That's true.
And we will talk about that with Marianne. And the last thing we will mention before we bring in our special guest is, usually the Florida stories don't have a happy ending. But of course, this is a total Florida man story. You wouldn't have expected it to go any other way. You realize this isn't the first time, but I know that you're kind of new here as a Floridian, kind of. But like dogs getting eaten by alligators
and being rescued. Yeah, it's happened actually quite a few times. You'll get homeowners walking on a golf course or walking somewhere, and a gator will jump up and grab their dog, and they'll fight them off. I mean, I'm just saying it is a great story, but it has happened before.
I've seen footage.
You're not reinventing the wheel.
Well, but I've seen footage of guys who literally dive into the water, and the gator either has like the dog like in its grasp, and the guy goes in there and like pounds the gator.
It's called a death roll.
It's a death roll.
Yeah, it's a death roll.
And thank goodness. But you even
that's
said,
what they do.
Because my father and his girlfriend have a condo in Naples, and
don't
they
let
have
your
a little
little doggy be walking around the edges of the water.
The lake that is behind their condo has gators,
of course.
And I'm just thinking, this is not exactly safe for little dogs to
be
around.
It isn't. Well, no, it's not. But or children, for that matter. Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.